Hi guys, Pete the Wargamer here, back with another painting tutorial. In this video, we will be focusing on some of the Zulu miniatures from Warlord Games Black Powder range. Now, before we go on, if you wanted to try out some of the techniques in this tutorial, Wargames Illustrated are giving away a free Zulu sprue in its April edition. The sprue will either be from the Married Impi, Unmarried Impi, or the Natal Native Contingent kits, all of which can be painted in the colours and techniques I'll be using in this video. Before we start painting, we first of all need to apply a primer so that later layers of paint adhere to the miniature's surface. It doesn't matter too much what colour you go for here, but I have opted to use a grey airbrush primer to help paint the various midtones of the miniature. We will begin painting our miniature by applying all of the base coats first. For all of these base coats that I'll be painting in this video, you'll want to thin it down with a little water. The paint I'm using for this first step is oak brown, so mix it with your water in roughly equal quantities, which will make the paint easy to work with. With your thinned oak brown, you can then apply this paint to all of the bare skin on your Zulu warrior. Apply your first coat, then, after allowing it to dry, apply a second coat over the top. This layering technique will ensure that you have a good, smooth base colour to build upon with your washes and highlights later. To paint the fur kilt, the shaft of the spear and other equipment, start things off with a base coat of leather brown. Opting to use a lighter colour than the skin will help this to stand out a little more. For the leather hide of the shield and also for the cowtails around the legs, arms and body, we want to create an off-white coloration. Therefore, I'll be starting things off with a base coat of Banshee Brown. Next, we want to tackle the black areas of the model. This includes the hair, spearhead, and the banding on the front of the shield. You can also use this paint to pick out some thick horizontal bands on the front of the kilt as well. For this step, I'll be using the dark grey of Necromancer Cloak, as it will allow us to still benefit from the shading created by a dark wash later on. With our base coats completed, we now want to apply a wash of strong tone, but before we do so, we need to again thin it down. This is because applying it straight from the bottle would be much too strong. However, instead of using water this time, I'll be mixing in some of the Army Painter Quick Shade Mixing Medium in equal parts wash to medium. The medium works by reducing the amount of pigment in the wash without changing its consistency. I find that this results in a much smoother and more subtle result than mixing in with water. However, if you don't have access to this medium, you could instead use a distilled water as well. Armed with your thin, strong tone wash, you now want to apply this wash to the darker brown coloured areas, such as the skin, fur, leather and wooden parts of the model. The wash will flow into the recesses, creating shading, which will improve the level of detail on the model. The next wash to apply is one of dark tone. This wash will be focused across any areas that we painted with Necromancer Cloak. As well as adding shading to the recesses, the wash should also help to darken the grey further. The final wash that we'll be using is one of soft tone. This wash will be focused over the lighter coloured areas that we base coated with Banshee Brown. This lighter wash in particular will benefit from being thinned down, as we don't want to darken down the light coloured areas too much. With the washes completed, we can now begin working on the highlights to help emphasise some of those details. To do this, lightly drag the tip of a thin brush along the raised edges. This will create a small line of lighter paint along those areas, helping to improve both depth and definition. We will start off by highlighting the skin using some leather brown. By thinning down the paint with just a little water, we should make this task much easier, as the flow of paint should be much smoother than if you'd used it straight from the bottle. Use this paint to pick out the facial features and musculature of the Zulu, focusing on the more pronounced areas. To highlight the areas of the model that we base coated using leather brown, apply some edge highlights of the lighter monster brown. When highlighting the brown bands of the kilt, focus mainly towards the top edges of the bands. For the raised strands of the cowtails and for the edge of the shield, I'll be using some drake tooth to highlight. If you have a steady hand, you can also use this to pick out the eyes as well. For the edges of the black areas of the model, apply a thin line of dungeon grey across the edges. Much like the monster brown highlight when tackling the banding of the kilt, focus only on the top edges of those bands. The final highlight is one of gunmetal, and this will be applied to the spearhead. By tackling the blade edges of the spear, we will create the effect of darkened metal, with the reflective edges giving off the appearance of sharpness. And here we have the completed Married Zulu Impi. As I mentioned before, you will find either the Married Impi, Unmarried Impi, or the Natal Native Contingent Sprue in the April edition of Wargames Illustrated, so keep an eye out for that magazine in your newsagents if you would like to try out these techniques. You can find a full list of all the paints that I've used in this tutorial in the description below, along with any other equipment that I've used to create this video. If you enjoyed this video, do let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out my Patreon page if you would like to support me in making these videos. If you have any questions or just like to chat with others who enjoy my channel, I've set up a Discord server which you can find a link to in the description below. And so the only thing left to say is, thanks for watching and goodbye.